Good morning. Thank you, first of all, to Philippe Pochet, who will give this Ciampi lecture on issues that is very much related with, I would say, most of the projects that we are at the moment carrying on in our department. We were discussing with Guglielmo about our role, so we decided I will open the Ciampi talk with 5 minutes presentations of the ways in which Philippe's work resonate with questions that are still open in our different research projects. And one of the issues that is central in Philippe presentations on climate change and welfare state, 2 worlds apart, is the cleavage which often develops within progressive type of social movements on issues of climate. And this we found very much in different pieces of research that give examples of cases in which the relationship is difficult, in cases in which instead there are openings from the side of the environmental movements and the side of the labor movement as well. But what I wanted to introduce is also another element that maybe goes not in the directions of the type of just transitions, but more of environmental justice. And it is the fact that several of these conflicts involve not only environmental organizations on the one hand and labor movements in different forms on the others, but also develop cleavages within the environmental movements. So in 5 minutes, I just wanted to mention 3 examples of struggles, protest campaigns that we are working on that directly speak to different type of cleavages. One, for instance, in Tuscany was a case of a very difficult relationship between the citizens and environmental movements that had discovered that very polluting and dangerous type of productions related with the industrial business developed in that areas were polluting through KO products. And there was the development of a type of coalitions that saw on the one hand environmentalists and citizens of the areas which were polluted, but on the other hand there was very high difficulties in getting the trade unions involved. And we wrote an article on this talking about the post-district economy, because it was one of these cases in areas in which traditionally district economy had been considered as capable of addressing different type of political issues, but in which the relationship was particularly difficult, also because of the interventions of organized crime. So a case of failure, but also there is another research we are doing on a case instead of success. GKN factories that was closed and in different ways was used by the workers to try to invent different forms of productions and focusing on products that took into account climate change. So there are these elements of analysis also of what makes alliances possible in some cases and not in others. But still another case that we work upon is significant in terms of the development of cleavages, not only between the workers and the environmental activists, but also within areas in which alternative sources of energies are located as form of become locally unwanted land uses. And in the concepts of land uses, there was also some reference to work and productions, because these are areas in which wind farms or other forms of quite invasive type of productions of alternative energies tend to affect other form of economic activities which are present, and the type of developments towards some type of specific economic activities in the rural areas, but also different types of use of the territories for tourism and other things. From Andalusia to the Laponi, Samiland, these type of conflicts are very advanced. And here I think the cleavage is often between a single issues vision of the climate change as only related with carbon productions on the one hand, and claims about environmental justice that should include other type of concerns with nature in general. So on these issues, I think Philippe's presentations will be extremely relevant in order to single out also the ways in which, from the sides of the labor movements, these different conflicts and potentially addressed. So I close the opening here and give the floor to Guglielmo for the rest of the presentation. And the floor is the mic.
Well, thank you, Donatella. Now we open the Azeglio Ciampi lecture by Philippe Pochet. Philippe Pochet was for about 15 years the director of the European Trade Union Institute, that is the research and training body of the European Trade Union Confederation. Before that, he had directed the Observatoire Social Européen in Brussels. He has been studying social policies and employment policies and trade union policies at the European level and comparatively for a couple of decades. It's been a pleasure to have him here, and I invite everybody who has been doing research on labor, trade unions, European social policy, and so on, to ask Philippe for context, for opinions, because, well, basically, any research who has been done on European labor in the last 30 years has gone through the table of Philippe at some stage. So we have then two discussants, and in order to have also a bit of debate, because as Donatella said, it's a topic that is of interest for many of us on different projects, I would ask Philippe to start, and I will 45 minutes and warn him when we are approaching the end. Thank you.
Was really a wonderful experience, and I will return in Tuscany in March or mid-March for 1 month, 1.5 months, 6 weeks. So we can continue this debate on climate change and social policies and other debates. I think it's, let's put first a little bit of the context and why I think it's important question and why I was interested by this question. So I think it's an important question, but it's also a very difficult question, because that's why when I started to be interested, let's say it was 15 years more ago. Okay, if you want to say something more than a discourse, you have to understand what is the kind of ecological problem and to address this kind of hard science. So you are used to move from one domain to another of social policy, or mix different domains, sociology, law, etc. But it's not so easy to enter with the kind of hard science of climate change and other domain, which I think is necessary to really start to understand. So I don't say that I'm a specialist at all, but I think that when we start with the trying to make sense of the problem, we have ourselves a problem to start to understand the different of two worlds. And personally, I was always interested to see where the people are not speaking, saying the other have an important discourse, but they don't know what to say about that. And the first was when I started to work 30 years ago about monetary union and social policy. At that time, the kind of people in that field say, okay, social policy will be affected by monetary union, but the economists say we have no idea how, and the others say, okay, monetary policy is very important, but we know nothing about monetary. So I think this kind of in between different disciplines is rather, at least for me, interesting. And then I start to work on that. And really, at the beginning, it was a topic that nobody was interested. I think that we start as Espanet with Jan Gov, and for 5 years we were the same 15 people. One sharing and the discussion, and it was Jan Gov. I think in the field it was really important because coming really from the welfare state and addressing really seriously the climate change. And then you had other entering in the field, but for a long time we were really marginalized as a question. What is really interesting now is that kind of flourishing field. You have PhD, in Italy in particular, very good PhD. You have older professors that move and now are interested by the topic, and that's make the field much more interesting and on the move in a way. That's just to say that yesterday there was a study on the CNRS about the Gilets jaunes, saying they are, in reality, I will return to that ecological approach of the Gilets jaunes, and you had the study of the European Investment Bank about inequality, showing that apparently we support to reduce the inequality for climate change. So this is really interesting and moving field, and that's I think the interest. I'm also interested, and here I will just focus on the welfare state. I will not speak, not a little bit, but not really about employment policy. But we have developed at the Institute, and I put that as a line. Something more, I think, general welfare state and climate change is kind of broad topic and too broad question, but also very concrete element. We had a very interesting study about the car industry and the high intensity industry, and then you mix in a way. Projecting is very different. What could be the future? What are the challenges on what is happening now on the ground, all the tension, all the choice that you have a mix of technology, geography, industrial relations, supply chain, etc. And finally, and it's a little bit in the presentation, what I like to do is mapping the actors. And I think what you said is at the end of the presentation is the key. What is missing so far, and that's kind of it was in my main point, is the question of the actors, the power, and the alliance. That's something that has to be developed, and that's really important. So normally I do, all my career I never did slides. Since I retired, I have done 200 slides, so 50 for this presentation, which is too much, but I'm so happy. You will find it's not so good, but for me it's fantastic. So I try to do my best, so it will be too long. So really stop that I can have. And I know when you are too long, the best is to start by the main message. It's when you have 5 minutes. So yeah, the main message, I think that's the main message I have 5 is the first. Framing is key but contested. So, you frame the problem, and I will insist on that. You have a very different policy, and there is no agreement how to frame the problem. And on the contrary, I think that's more and more tension, including within the environmental movement, which means that you have different scenarios which are possible, at least for me. The second one is inequality is key, but when we say that, it's much more complex. What you mean by inequality is key is really a complex question, because it's not, we could not be only by reducing inequality that you could solve the problem. Third point, welfare state will be key in the future, because as I will try to show, we will enter, according to me, in a season of conflict, tension, if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement objective. And then we'll have two sides, which is buffering and enabling still need to have some conceptualization. My fourth point, it was your introduction. Actors, power, alliance is often missing in the academic account. And then the tension is always, I think that is very difficult, is about change. Because you have change that in one community, that kind of ecological community, say we don't have time. There is the other change that all people in social science knows that change the society takes time. So you have a timing question that is not working. And that's really, when you speak change, there is something, a mismatch of that. So no, I hope it's working. Fantastic. You look at the slides. Never did that so good. No, I will try to, that's kind of the first, where we are and why climate change and the welfare state should be linked. What is the rationale for that? Second, is sometimes interested to speak about failed attempt, because we like for publishing, you need to have result. But when it's not working, it's also interesting to see why it was not working. So that I will speak quickly about eco-social state and clustering. Then the main is about the framing problem and propose different way of framing. Then the public policy and the role of the welfare state in the different scenario, and then address question, governance, power, and alliance. That's kind of, that's the goal to arrive to that. So the importance, I think that's also most of the debate is about the energy production and partly about the industry. So when we have you see the gas emission is more or less half of the problem. So we are speaking about half of the problem. The rest are agriculture, transportation, and building. So that's the topic that are much less addressed when we speak about climate change. And you read, you say, okay, there is a new progress in windmills, nanotechnology, blah, blah, blah. But what about the rest? And if you look where we are, and that's the recent publication of Bruegel, that's the reduction during the last 10 years. We did some progress where we did some progress on the energy and the energy grid, and partly in the industry. There is no progress at all in the transport, the agriculture, and the building. So that's the three. There is no progress at all, and even in some account there is more emission depending the date for the transport sector now than 10 years ago. And that's also very fascinating, because we speak always about electric car, right? But I had the last information about how many cars are in Belgium. And in 1 year, we have 200,000 more cars, which are not electric. So we have a discourse about electric car, but in the same time, we have a stock on traditional engine, which is continuing to grow, that is not reporting. So that you will have no tension, because that's the target for 2030. If you look to the IPCC are very good, but that's really all the scientific like to present the problem. They put a graph, a lot of information, and you are supposed to change your mind. So that's, I'm sorry, there is too many information, but there's the simplification. We are here, that's we are increased. That's the red line is what we will arrive, where we will arrive if we implement the policy we set, and the blue and the green is where we have to go. So let's be frank, there is no chance to have 1.5% and little chance to have 2%. That's kind of 2 degrees. That's just mobilize the discourse, but in reality, when you see where we are and what we have to do, it's a lot of change. That's kind of, you have to multiply by 3 the investment, when you know that Germany has some problem about investment, and you have not only to multiply by 3, but you have to reduce by 2 the investment in oil, gas, etc. So it's not you have to do and you have not to do. So that's really the change. Now we enter a period when the easiest part was done. And the easiest part is change the bulb to the left, that is kind of good investment for the future, but change not your life. So now we have to speak about the space, how we organize the space, the city, the rural, the forest, the agriculture, that will be how we move and what we eat. That's really entering in some zone of tension, and that's why I say that's we are a period that the debate will change. If you look to the topic once again put by the IPCC is about water, about food production, about health and well-being, about cities, settlement, infrastructure, biodiversity, and ecosystem. So much broader than what is present generally. And there is clearly the generational problem. So I'm born a little bit before the 60s. So I arrived just before it will cause a lot of problem. It's not by chance that the young is now mobilized for the future, because that's their future. So there is a huge change in perspective. So what are the consequences? Once according to me, political tension, conflict, inequality. So enter in a period when the kind of consensus, green growth discourse could be over. You see that the end of the political consensus for the Green Deal. You have all the center right, but certainly the populist saying, let's stop with climate change. We want to keep our traditional lifestyle and our traditional lifestyle. And that's the counter narrative. Is, by the way, very environmental friendly because we are close for the forest and blah, blah, blah. And we defend the poorest. We defend the poorest because the change, they will be the most affected. And I think that's really the change. No, that's kind of, when you arrive, the conflict is about the political scenes changing rather radically. There will be other conflict linked to migration. Is more debatable because there is, okay, what is the migration for environment or other source of migration. It's not direct migration, but in a way, there also we enter in the reality. If you are down under in Australia and on New Zealand, you have a refugee because the island will disappear, and then you enter in the reality. And we know that the water is, even we stop now to do any emission, will continue to grow for centuries ago. So that will create some new tension. And finally, the inequality. There is different type of inequality on the contribution, on the exposure, and the incidence of cost benefit. So when you speak, even to say inequality is rather complex because there is different forms of inequalities. In the same times, there is an answer, and sometimes there is not so many trade union victory. At least that's a clear victory about the narrative. Just transition is now the way, one of the way of presenting the challenge. So it's in the same time it became acceptable not only in the preamble of the agreement, but in the center of the text, but in the same time nobody can define what is a just transition. You have tons of definition about that. Then you have the question, and I think that nobody really wants to tackle, is, if we reduce inequality, does it mean that it reduces the emission? Not sure. It could be that if you reduce the inequality, if people buy a car and take the plane, you increase the emission. So it's nice to say we reduce the inequality, that's for social side, but you don't know if there is no changing in the lifestyle, and they adopt the lifestyle of the middle class. I don't even say rich, the middle class. We go nowhere. We solve a problem, a social problem, but not the environmental problem. There is other way of thinking, and that's also this kind of study that just I read the interview yesterday, that the Gilets jaunes, because they were in reusing. They have their own garden. Perhaps they have another type of ecology that the bobo or the middle class, and the dialogue between the two groups was difficult because they don't understand each other. What is the way that they perceive ecology? So what is changing? And it was not so visible, but in 2003, a high-level group on the future of social protection and the welfare state, and Anton Emmerich was on one on the at EY. There is the kind of recognition that there is important question of welfare state. So this is the recognition. Even I think that was not so easy because the first time. Document, but and then you have also the possible impact, because when you speak about welfare state, let's put the sector of the welfare state. What is the impact on health? What is the impact on pension, employment, training, education? If you put education state, poverty, health and safety, housing. So I will not list all the impact, but it is more interesting to see that if you speak concretely, what is the impact, for example, on pension? It's kind of have so much. David wrote a paper on the pension and pension funds and climate change, but the health, there is plenty of networks, really interesting networks, but still difficult to have any concrete narrative or emerging narrative recognized in the sector. And health and pension are the main sector of the welfare state. So there is still, if you look to the different sector, some work to be done. Employment is the one where you have most of the studies. What is interesting, and that's just passant, is that if you look where we will create the job in job is in the construction, because you have retrofitting, you have to create the network, you have to create redo the grid for electricity. You have to have all the hydrogen network if you use the pipeline for gas. So it will be, all the studies are showing that the study we did on high-intensive industry was showing that the gain of job was for the construction. We have already a problem with the construction, not enough workers. That means also that we will have to discuss the posted worker, migration, etc. But that's the clear domain, and is completely out of mostly out of the debate. Finish on this impact. Then, if you will see, there is the other way, and I already alluded in the main point is. Sabato and colleagues put the four way of four function for the welfare state, because you have to operationalize a little bit. Buffer, as I say, that will be one that is the most traditional, but enabling what could be the measure for enabling is not very clear. So, how long I have? Still 20 minutes? That's really what is not working. I think it's kind of the welfare state and eco state that that was in the literature trying to say we go from welfare state to eco state is not working really well. There is common point, clearly, is capitalism, or how to tame capitalism, depending on the version. Welfare state is dealing with big challenge, inequality, solidarity, redistribution, poverty. It's about risk and the reduction of risk. And it's about stability of the system against a possible collapse. So if you have the two, that's what they have in common. But what they don't have in common, I think, is much more interesting, is the actors. In one, you have the social class, the working class, you have the political party, social democracy, the communists. On the eco state, everyone is supposed to be on board, but some argue that rich must pay. But who are the rich? And I will return to that because that's also interesting. But there is completely different timing. That's the timing, the ecological debt, urgent to act against slow-moving institution. There is something that you cannot compare the expense of 1/4 of GDP to few percent, so that, and the support. That's the question of alliance. I think that's interesting. You have some alliance. You had the most interesting, and you put in your article with Park and Park also about right to water with EPSU. That was really an interesting alliance between trade union movement and more activist NGOs. But you have also a problem, as you said, that's the study of Jesula about the right for energy, because if one social say, okay, the energy should be cheap, if it's cheap, you consume more, and there is the tension. So I think when we have this approach, it's interesting to see where are the difference more, or we can combine the two and arrive. The second one, that's the summary of the two, and what is also interesting, because I said that, and then I will start to address the question also. That we have different type of actors, you have different vision, but if you look to the two more important, among the more important book, Baccaro on the GROW model, and Anke and Bruno about the role of the welfare state, environmental questions were not there. So they were not able. So you will see, as to Lucio to have something about their book in transfer and to address the question of environment. And in the piece, he said it's for the next book, it will be about environment and future research. The same for that. So in the same time, there is some kind behind the debate, echo, the question of environment and grow is remain important. And that's one of the arguments of an author which is taking more environmental option. The name is not here, but it's green, so you can remember. Showing what they have in common. And the GROW model and the varieties of capitalism, they have the same, that's independent of environmental factor. GROW is normatively positive. GDP is the dominant metric, and the problem-solving orientation is to our GROW maximization. Will not enter because it's full other debate and too long. But it's interesting because if GROW is not the ultimate goal, what are the value of those studies that say they compare based on GROW? That is something, perhaps there is something different to deal with. So could we use Esping Anderson? The answer is no. Clearly, but there was a lot of start. People start. The Scandinavian leaders, it's not really clear, and Garcia say it's not clear at all. You have the problem if you have the cluster, the huge reduction in Eastern Europe because of the transition, so that disindustrialization. Eastern Europe is in different cluster, and you have the big problem, and I think it's, once again, a fundamental problem is what is the indicator? How you use the indicator? Is that the green investment or an ecological index? Is the national emission or national consumption? And depending of what is the indicator you use for the ecological cluster, you have different answer, and that's also make our stuff stable. That's some of the quotation that are showing that. There is public opinion, which once again show the different group, and I think that's helped to shape the debate for the future. Pro-welfare and pro-environmental 1/3, pro-welfare 1/4, 1/5 pro-environment, against both welfare and environment, more or less the extreme. So that's sure so that there is kind of different type of coalition, but only less than 40% are making the link between welfare and environment. So it's once again, it's not the same actors in the two groups. So I finish. Check. That and I go to the diverse way of framing the problem and the solution, and I think that's where we are now. Is how we are trying to share, to frame the problem and then to see what public policy could be linked on the way of framing the problem. And the first question: do we speak about climate change or environment? It's not clear. Because if you put environment, you have biodiversity, pesticide, water, is completely different. And if you look to the literature, I think biodiversity, the people working in the environmental field will argue is at the same level that climate change. They say that the risks are the same level. But when you have the actors, academic debate, in the social side about biodiversity, you have nothing. And I've tried for the trade union to organize something about biodiversity and what for the trade union. So how can we frame something that makes sense, even people can recognize is very important, personal term, but makes sense in collectively. So here I will just, I will speak mainly on climate, framing the climate. If you put environment, you go on the right of the tension. People say the change should be much more than we have so far to have. What is interesting in exercise, I think, and there is mainly in French, but there is English, is the exercise done by ADEME in France about or in France they could be neutral in 2050. And they take a lot of different items: society, food, housing, personal mobility, technical governance, region, which based on region, macroeconomic industry. Once again, what is interesting, if you have a long list of different topics and different levels that you have to consider, and they have then 4 scenarios. With the 4 scenario, you achieve in 2050 the goal to be neutral. But in the scenario, you have a very different. The frugal generation is really, you concentrate on changing individual and collective. And the good indicator is that you will consume the society in that scenario 30% of the meat that you are eating. Kind of huge reduction personally. You don't eat meat collectively at 30%. You have the other extreme is the gamble is the purely technological scenario. So you bet on technology that you know that doesn't exist or are not proved that it could exist for the future. I don't speak there in carbon capture for the industry. There's already the test, but for example, using that to take CO2 from the air, that doesn't exist so far, and other technologies. So if you use all the technology, still you have to change your behavior, but it's more or less you reduce the meat by 10%, which is actual trends. And then in between, you have 2 scenarios, what they call regional cooperation and green technology, which is less technological. But what I think, what is my take of that is that you have 2 poles. You have the technological innovation and then the individual and collective behavior. As we don't know in the future how much technology we don't know how much we have to change. Is there also part of the problem? Because if we were sure about technology, we can do that and not that, then you can calculate and you say you have to change the behavior for that. But if you are not sure, and there is a huge debate at the domain about the technology, you have this kind of question mark, and then the different scenarios are feasible or should be envisaged as credible. So you have different ways. You have the way that I will use, I think it's the simplest, is technology and societal and individual change. I think that's there is two. It's collective and individual. Those you have the tension. But you can also phrase that in different way, like green capitalism and post-capitalism and degrowth. And then you arrive to something that is post-capitalism and degrowth. I will return to next tension. Is that if you are not out of the capitalism, you don't solve the problem. But okay, that's something. Or you go out of the capitalism is not. And the green capitalism, more or less, is you put sustainable in all your documents, and then you think that you solve the problem. There is kind of tension or phrasing that's clear. That's no, there is a consensus, political groups around the green capitalism. It's not a strong consensus, but certainly not about degrowth or post-growth. So that's kind of, if you go for radical change, I put this quotation, I think it's mainly because I think that Charbonnier is a philosopher and he has really interesting view topic, but it's really the ecological question affect the very essence of the social earth, the capital institution that guarantees the circulation. Take this approach, then you arrive to something really big and very complex that can in center. And if you want to change that, we return, you cannot think about changing that without conflict. It's not something that you change by arguments or idea. But you have also the other way, Anthropocene or Capitalocene, and that's you wrote a very interesting piece about that, Luigi. That's kind of the difference. There is different kind of definition, but it's also when the problems start, and then you have different. You can start with the agriculture, or you can start with the Second War and the utilization or the increase of utilization. But I think that we can think differently. Is the problem is us collectively, and then you have the Anthropocene, or the problem is part of the humanity and part of the society, the rich, the capitalists, the Western Europe, etc. So or you phrase that, is that collective problem as human being, or is that a problem of part of the human being? And then you arrive to the last one that I found the most interesting, but I'm not philosopher. Is the question, which I think is fundamental. If you add biodiversity, human dominate, shape the nature, are human as part of the nature. Then you arrive on something which is really the deep belief, and you cannot change people that can have a conversion, but change society. But I think that's the real question of the future. You cannot help to solve what kind of public policy, but you cannot ignore that in a more subtle way, this question is important. So I think that's turning to this kind of simplification. You have ecological challenge, you have two versions, adaptation or transformation, and that's important. Adaptation is more or less you use the institution as we know it, you adapt. Transformation, you change change the way you and that's different, and that's the way different way to frame the problem. So now, what is the role of the welfare state? Having showing, I tried that. Now we enter in a key moment. There is the kind of some paths that are leading to nothing that we can use. There is a lot of different way of framing, or we can think about public policy and what is on the table so far. So it's mixed here on mapping what is proposed and trying to make sense of the challenge in different way. Once again, you return. That's kind of interesting. So that advice, if you don't know him, there is what is the different approach that are in the political debate are linked to grow. And you have the what we call irrational or optimist. Then you have the green growth, just transition. You will say that's the difference of the three here, depending of the authors. Sustainable development and sustainable welfare, which is there is already on grow. You have 5 different approaches, which will lead to different way of mobilizing welfare state and what could be the solution. But there is an article that will be present this afternoon in the network article that they put differently: adaptive social protection, just transition, Green New Deal, post-grow, and ecofeminist. Ecofeminist is a important part of this literature, and about care of planet and caring of the human. And what is interesting in their view is that you have different type of element. Is the role of the capitalist growth, also the geographical element, because it's very different if you say it's a problem and you limit your attention to Europe, or to say it's a global problem. You have completely different policy if you put that in a global perspective. The actor political context and also the role of change, and in the table, so there's kind of just a summary of the literature, or they see the different approach, or they see the reaction of growth. So the 2 last are post-grow ecofeminist, are post-capitalist, but what is the role of the welfare state? You can disagree. I think that I have a different idea about all the people are framing that, but the point, once again, is that depending of your approach, your role that you are giving to the welfare state is very different. I skipped this one. So let's see what is the sustainable development, just transition. So I go down one level again to say, okay, what's happening? What are the debate? There is 3, I think, debates when you are in just transition agenda, green transition, green growth, is greening the welfare state institution, using the existing scheme, or having another pillar of the welfare state. So the first ones is, you decarbonize the welfare state. It's a question, and I start was really interesting because I was in Paris in the and one of the directors said, we want to decarbonize the welfare state, but nobody is in charge of that. So everyone say, yes, we should do that. We should think, we can emit less CO2, or we can think about the medical equipment, the food, etc. But nobody say the structure was not there. So that's kind of the easiest, perhaps change nothing, but could change a little bit. Retrofitting the existing scheme, there is debate between 2 schools. One say we have already all in the welfare state, and the next will need to have this new risk, and we need to have a new sector. But it is the way, or can we reinterpret the policy and to use them for doing something else, which is easier because there is already a consensus is adopted. You have to without, for example, one traditional example is an unemployment benefit in some sector for the rainy days. You can put that for the heat waves, then you address a new problem with other institutions. And the last one is to have a specific sector. That's the proposal that Éloi Laurent was doing. What I think is interesting is that I'm working on that, but I don't have time here to is that we could have a role at the European level. Have a role because there is two funds, the Just Transition Fund and the Social Climate Fund. For the first time, there is a fund that the Social Climate Fund, starting in 2020. Will have the capacity to have a direct impact on the income of the individual, which was never the case before. And you have the Globalization Fund, which also gives some of the argument about a new risk at European level, that you can create some protection at European level. If you go for post-growth, what is on discussion is mainly a universal basic income, so it is the same for 40 years, the same. What is developing the green care conditional basic income and the free basic public service basic services. In the way, there is, as I said, nothing on pension, little on health, little on funding. So the kind of literature, they don't explain how you will fund pension. Element. If you go for the UBS, you have the classical critique that are the same. But what is interesting is that we are not sure, and then we return the question of inequality. We are not sure that it will not increase. Why you say that if your universal basic income not increase the CO2. So you have the surfer in Malibu can eat meat and drive his car as he wants because it's some which is in the UBS. So you cannot assume, and there is no study showing that if you even go in that direction, that solve the problem of the emission. There is one of emerging field that's which is the conditional, which is really interesting. Link also with the feminist critique and take care of the world, much more based on Sen. So I don't have time just to mention. So unaddressed question, if I have 3 minutes more. 3. At 5, 4. Okay, unaddressed, the governance is we are all on board and nobody left behind, or there is specific responsibility for 1, 10, 50%, and the rich should be left behind. So the kind of is the most difficult governance stable commitment against democratic choice, election, or you have stability in the same choice. Do you go for deliberation of authoritarianism? That's kind of deliberation everyone like, but take time. Authoritarianism doesn't like, but at least you can. Policy, there is the famous, if US could be China for a day, from the famous journalist, I'm saying, okay, take all the necessary problem. And what you do with the welfare state, slow moving institution. The power, why the rich will abandon privilege, that's not a art of the why middle class will reduce consumption for developing country, and why bottom 50 will decide to have a different model of consumption. The alliance we spoke already, and then I arrived to the conclusion. I think that's still to work apart, but we have much less than before, so it's kind of map the actors. It's becoming much more interesting. That's different perspective. Is still more normative. We should do that than practical answer, or we move. Still many unanswered question, and the tension that nobody, I think, solve the slow-moving society institution against urgency. That, and I've used all my minutes that you gave.
Thank you, Philippe. Well, one big challenge always when talking about climate change is that we have very little time, and it is also simplified by what happens in a lecture and in a debate. So I will move immediately to our discussants. The first one is Chiara Milan, who is a researcher here at Scuola Normale Superiore. She's an expert on social movements, on divided societies, on migration. touched by the presentation by Philippe, please.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Philippe, for the presentation, and also Guglielmo for the introduction. I'm also an expert on the Western Balkans, and I would like to start from this hint that you give, for instance, of the geographical problem of this issue. Because if we take a European perspective or a global one, I understand it is different, but what about taking the perspective of the European semi-periphery? I mean, when we talk about just transition, I was wondering how does it translate into the Western Balkans, which are not part of the emission trading schemes. So it is cheaper to buy energy from Balkans, but they also detain the 16 coal-fueled power plants. So, and of course, they also don't have this social welfare system that is granting the workers that were previously or are still working in the coal mines to be reallocated to other kind of jobs. So there is also one of our researchers studying the movements, the environmental movements in the Western Balkans, also stressing this issue. And also studying the opposition of the civil society, not only to the closure of mines, because it will entail the job loss for miners, but also the opposition of the civil society to the like clean energy production with hydropower plants. So I think that what is missing, not in your presentation, but in general in the European perspective, is this idea of the neighborhood countries, because there will be an enlargement. I mean, all those countries are almost all candidate countries, so they will enter the European Union. They are the most polluting. It is interesting, they are not consuming more, but they are polluting more than the other countries. Plus, it is cheaper to buy energy from them. So I just wanted to know if you have a hint on this. And in general, if there is some sensitivity towards this idea of just transition that so far has been externalized to the Western Balkans from the European Union, but with no, I mean, for me, with a little concern on what is going on there, although there is a vibrant civil society addressing the issue from different perspectives, that sometimes they don't align with the environment movements that we have in Western Europe. So just if you have an idea or if you have any comments on that.
Thank you, Chiara. Introducing the important spatial dimension of inequality and wealth. That is the matter of redistribution within country, also between the European Union and outside the European Union in particular. Now, Luigi Pellizzoni is a second discussant, and is a professor of environmental sociology here at Scuola Normale Superiore. By the way, there is another conference on political ecology, which Luigi has organized starting tomorrow in the same place. So if you want to know more about these problems, we are not stopping at 1 o'clock. It will, the conversation will go on. Please, Luigi.
Thank you. And by the way, there will be French speakers, because it was organized around French debates on political ecology. So, yeah. So thank you very much, Philippe, for this very rich and encompassing presentation, which to me raises a lot of issues. So I just touch very quickly. I have noticed 6 of them, but just very, very quickly. One, it's about framing. So you very rightly said that the framing is crucial. But I mean, the framing is not so much about the character of the ecological issue, so whether just climate change or environment in all the elements, but also about the social aspects, in the sense that all framing depends on what you take as a fixed, as a parameter, and what you take as a variable. So this may apply, for example, to capitalism, but also to technology. Which kind of technology or which kind of innovation would be imaginable and foreseeable and to be promoted, and of course, as you mentioned, whether capital is or not. So, I mean, the issue of framing goes hand in hand both on the environmental side and the social side. So this is a first element of complexity. Second point that you also touched is the issue of urgency, because the different timings of technological transformation and societal transformation make a lot of problem, but because of quite easily one can think, well, maybe it's easier to go faster with technology and slower with the societal change. But the problem of urgency is involving both at the same time, in my view, because all the notion of the spreading issue of collapse, the risk of collapse, is giving a sense of urgency that it is not necessarily compatible, both, of course, with democratic processes. So in general, it is going towards closing down the decision processes and whatever. But this is not necessarily beneficial to proper thinking about which kind of innovation, which kind of social change should be promoted. So I mean, the notion of urgency runs the risk to be overwhelming on all sides. So both, I mean, the technological elites or governmental elites, but also on the side of working workers and unions. So this is a big question as well. Third point, it's about you touched it while talking about should we focus on Europe or enlarge the discussion, whatever. One question that is coming up is what we may call the end of globalization as we understood it until recently, because the globalization affected the welfare state in many ways. And of course, we have not time to address that. But as long as globalization is at least changing, and changing towards the breaking of commodity chains, and so also the connection between workers in different levels and different places of the world, then this raises a big question. Because if we go, at least in two senses, one, if we go into closer areas of influence, so commodity chains that are more locally and regionally located, how does this affect labor market and whatever? And the second point, if it is true, as many say, that we are going towards a kind of neo-medieval societal structure, so with a very rich and affluent elite, very small elite, and a very broad neo-proletarianization of the rest of the population, what happens with the support of the welfare state, which is based basically on having a good, middle class that has the money to fund the welfare state and also the innovation. So, end of globalization, what does it mean and how does it affect? Fourth point, technological change. There are at least 2 points. One is the extent to which we are tending to privileging some transformation with the risk of lock-in. And the way in which, for example, the whole transformation of mobility into electrical mobility, to me at least, is raising a big question mark, because it runs the risk to create a big lock-in. And the question that also trade unions should support is also on the labor aspect of the issue, is whether it would be more convenient to think of diversification. In times of uncertainty, it is not, generally speaking, a good idea to focus just on one or very few lines of transition. There should be many, more adapted to local conditions and so on and so forth. And also the idea that the technology can develop or change independently of society, or they go by their own way. So one sense, technological development, on the other sense, societal transformation, welfare state transformation, but possibly the two things are really tied together in an inextricable way. So we should think more of them together. I have no solution, of course, but just a question mark. We should think of them together. Inequality, fifth point. Of course, you said quite rightly that there are many aspects of inequality, and it is not necessarily clear which or how to accommodate. addressing all of them, but yet there are indicators that there are some big points, like the Oxfam reports, that show that there is a big problem with the unsustainability of a relatively small elite. So possibly there should be avenues for addressing first and foremost that part of the problem, and then having all the others. So just having a direction in how to attack or tackle inequality. Last point, possibly the most delicate, I don't know, is the relationship between sustainability, welfare state, and work. So you mentioned universal basic income and all the problems related to the fact that if you go to this direction, that this is not necessarily good for sustainability. But more in general, I personally see a lack of elaboration or a lot of elaboration still in front of us regarding the notion of post-work. What does it mean, post-work? Does it mean just delivering many things to automation or something else, or just reframing what is work in general? What is our approach to the materiality? Because you have to keep in mind that our own understanding of work is related to capitalist industry, and to the relationship between the abstract work and abstract notion of energy. There are some interesting literature emerging on that. So we are stuck in a certain understanding of work that is stuck in a certain understanding of what is energy, how we can transform reality and whatever. So maybe it should be now the moment to a very deep rethinking of the notion of work, and of course of post-work. So of course in a radical understanding of transformation. Thank you very much again.
Luigi, Philippe, would you like to have a first reply to this? In the meanwhile, if anybody have questions, please start to raise your hands, and then we gather some questions from the floor. There's already one, but we start with these two questions, and then we move to the floor. We have enough time, at least for this. Maybe not to solve the problem of climate change, but at least for the debate.
Okay, thank you for the ideas of 6 books and 6 conferences. I think that's a very, very big question. 7 with the first one. I will first address. If you look the European debate, what is fascinating in the European debate when you are in Brussels is if we solve the problem of Europe, meaning EU 27, we are solving the problem of the world. But there is no really attempt to say, okay, that's just part of the world, and there is much more difficulty. As you say, they solve the problem basically of the goalie in Poland because they will pay for that. It's just this kind of the minor was the most interesting case because we used to say is the statistical error in the statistic for employment is 0.1% of the population. Cannot pay for 0.1% of the population. Of course, so it's the really easy problem, but it's easy problem in Europe. It's not so easy when you go outside of Europe in the first periphery if you enter. And I think that's the real problem is was so concentrated on solving or trying to find consensus and the whole level that even the periphery is the same. I think that's the same for the car industry. The car industry is concentrated on how Germany will transform its car industry. Look for the car industry for Eastern Europe are confronted for a huge problem because they produce the car, but they don't use new car. That's 95% is second-hand car. So we have to change in 2025. No more car normally, but all will go to Europe because they continue to that type of car. So even within the space of Europe, I think there is some concentration on some problem. And the car industry, if you continue, because that's my, that is just you took the wrong decision. You put the wrong car that use a lot of rare material that are very expensive, that nobody can pay 50,000 euro on the market. They are not ecological at all. In that way, you could control completely different type of car. And then it's antisocial. So you can also have, that's also your pick, we'll return to that. But you can have a choice which is non-green, non-social, but presented as the transition we need. And certainly creating the question, clear question about on your question about urgency. I will start by urgency because that's interesting. Remember the last crisis, 2008. What was the study in the last crisis? All green, the US, Korea, and Europe were in the investment plans. That's the urgency, and there were publications comparing the different investment, how much we can invest, how we change, and there was this kind of green capitalism already 15 years ago. In 15 years, what are the progress? We return to schools are a little bit more sophisticated. There is more policy, but it was the same in 15 years. Most done. So in a way that we say urgency, but more we are waiting, more we are confronted with the problem. It's clear that if we have started to address the problem in the 90s, that all the evidence were there to change, and there was period some change to change. We should have we could have a different trajectory, but no. Every 10 years we say we have to change, nothing changed, the emissions are the same. There is one point that we are really in urgency, and that's clear that we can have all the I think that are important, but in the same time, at one point you have to take decision, and the decision, that's my point, will be more and more difficult, create tension, will create tension, or we accept that we will go for that, and that we have to adapt to the solution, because we are unable to find enter in conflict. But I think that for me now, and the really urgency go with conflict. Before, the urgency would go with some kind of creating consensus, building consensus. Now I think that we have to reintroduce the conflict into the equation. Is there the end of globalization? That's kind. Okay, that's perhaps, I would say. It depends also what you see and what are the statistics. There is Baldwin. There is an interest. Baldwin arguing that yes, there is less trade for the goods, but much more for the service. Then it's no longer the last figure of the trade of China. If you put some part of Vietnam as quasi-China because they just delocate there to US, and you put US go because they try to change. So I think once again, I think it's really interesting, and the other on climate, I'm working also on the internal market, because I think that you have to rethink with the social and environmental and strategic autonomy, completely rethink the internal market. Way that my hypothesis is also that we go more grouping, etc. But still, I think that when you see some of the statistics, I'm not so sure that. I think it's more for me a kind of open question: do we go for fragmentation really, or not? And then rightly you enter, I think, to the question which is the question of center periphery. Or some, because if you put the question of the green transition in Brazil, is about dependency. You return to all the theory of dependency. Cardozo and green imperialism. So it's also this kind of world, even not just stopping on the globalization or not, but also this kind of center periphery in the transition. So I think that's a good idea for other 2 hours or 2 days discussion. There is a lot of very interesting mention to technological change. There is all the discussion, also kind of the slow technique and the element. There is the discussion and the point about diversity. I think that's interesting because there is clear the kind in the car industry, because I have the slide in German and I said that IG Metall was for a long time to say we are neutral on technology. We are trade unionists. We know nothing about what is best to have hydrogen, synthetic gas or electric, etc. And at one point, they decide collectively, they say, we go for electrification. And then the guy, the slides are funny because that's kind of... First is, we all agree that we produce the best car in Germany. Yes. We all agree that nobody wants diesel car for the moment. Yes. Then we all agree that we will produce the best electric car. And that's the debate was internally in the Metall, was in a way finished, and then you have the change in Volkswagen deciding. So this kind of diversity of technology, if you put that, I know that you have a different perspective, but in trade union movement is to avoid to have any decision, because you can say nothing about technology in the transition for the car, you say nothing about what is the future. Oh, they have embraced the new model, but they have embraced a model once again, as you said, the trade, which is favorable in Germany to keep the job, throw the curve people in the car industry. Model of the electric car, very expensive with a lot of technology, etc. Will inequality, I think that you are right, but it's funny, all the Oxfam stuff. They say, okay, the 1%. Okay, 1% is 80 millions of people. Perhaps we are not here among the 80 limit. But the other figure is the 10%. It's 800,000 people that have to change. That's us. So people using this argument say, okay, look, it's the 10% I have to change, but it's not me. Sorry, it's Western Europe middle class. We are in the 10%. So to say that's the other and take the rich when you put the 10%, because the 1% they take also the data are okay. If you say that the 5 companies, all companies are emitting the maximum and they're responsible, but you stop that and you nationalize them, what is the result is the same. So they kind of they put the production and the control of the production, which is in the calculation, I think not the right way. But we arrive exactly, I think that's all is framed in terms of power. And all when you have conflict, you have us and them, and then you put the conflict, or you say we are in the same boat. We are all in a way, and the rich is very, Latour wrote on that kind of very kind of pessimistic. When you have the retreat of the rich, you can see the liberal, that's the analysis, the liberal, neoliberal, is that we cannot afford to have everyone on the planet, so I return, I go out of the national compromise, I'm buying my island, I do some protection, I put some arms. That's Ballet doing already that, and then that's the solution. So you can also have this reading from Latour about inequality. But I think once again, it's something that need to have debate, but I don't think that we have a solution. Perhaps I stop there because the post-work is also a fascinating debate. But
post-work for post-lecture. Now, we have a couple of questions. I have to hand over the mic.
Thank you, Philippe, for this fascinating and impressive presentation. My name is Marina Cino Pagliarello. I am a Marie Curie Fellow at the European University Institute. I work on higher education and their third missions, so how universities contribute to tackle global challenges, and climate change is one of these. My question is on framing, is links a bit on the point that Luigi made as a social issue. So framing is not only, as you said, framing a problem has not only implications for the solution, right? What to do and how to do, but is also an issue of problem ownership. So which actors in the end are in charge of doing something? So maybe I was wondering if you can elaborate a bit more on how the framing of the problem is linked to actors' ownership and what kind of actors have this ownership, maybe linking a bit at the end of the final part of your presentation when you were mentioning the governance and the alliances. Thank you.
Question from David Natali.
Thank you. David Natali from Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies. I have a couple of questions about the European political economy. And you refer on the one hand to the European Green Deal and the fact that it seemed that in the last 10 years or a few years, basically there has been a turn in the way the European leaders think about the European political economy and the European economic and social governance. And in that respect, I would be a little bit provocative. It seems to, relive a sort of old story started with, for instance, the Lisbon strategy. We set the targets and we missed the targets. In Lisbon, more than 20 years ago, we said, okay, we have to be knowledge-based economy, the best of and the most competitive in the world, and so on. And we missed the targets. Then we had Europe 2020. We revised the target, and again, we missed the targets. There were some progresses, but too little. And now we set the target with Fit for 55 and all the other things, and you already show that we will miss the targets. So in the end, are we, shaping our own debate in the right direction, or it's just a sort of meta debate where we pretend to be green and to revise a little bit our strategy, but in the end, it's too little and too slow. And this is, for instance, related to the revision of the Stability and Growth Pact. Again, where is the room for investments? There is no room for investments. But we know that we need a lot of investments to become really green. And in the end, it seems that it's just, we are talking about, in the end, green growth. So we are not talking about revising our own development model, but we are just thinking of becoming a little bit green. But again, it is too little and too slow. The second question is related, but is more based on the complex link between climate change, environmental policy issues, and technological innovation. So again, we say in a very rhetoric way, we will be more green, we will set very ambitious green targets, and we will be the leader of the green transition worldwide. But in the end, if you think that in order to become more green, you need a lot of investment, and we miss it. At the same time, you also need new technologies. And we already know that, for instance, we are, late in developing technologies and using technologies for solar energy issues. China has a monopoly on that. We are a little bit better in wind energy technologies, but still, China and US are growing much faster than us. And in 10-year time, we will lose our leadership also in this niche. So in the end, okay, we are pretending to become the leader in the green transition, but we are missing everything in the sense that we don't look for more investments. And at the same time, we miss all the technological supports that we need in order to be. And I don't touch the other part of the story, that is the access to the market of raw materials and rare elements. Again, we are completely out of the market, of the global market in that respect. And in the future, we need these things in order to become more green. So in the end, are we just reliving the same story of the Lisbon strategy failure?
Thank you, David, for this injection of optimism. Marco De Seris at the back.
Have the mic. Thank you. Marco De Seris, also a faculty here at the Scuola. Thank you for this very wide range and thought-provoking presentation. We rarely see them. It's really important, I think. And I'm just gonna piggyback on David Natali's point on the missing of the targets, right? We seem to be almost like in this state. It reminds me a little bit of the ghost plan, of the Soviet ghost plan in the 50s and 60s, when they set these targets that they knew they couldn't reach, and then they fake the stats just to show that they were reaching them. Maybe the difference today is that we don't fake the stats, right? But everybody seems to be pretty knowledgeable of this now, and but nobody seems to address the elephant in the room, right? And the elephant in the room is that you cannot reach these targets because we live in a capitalist society, and in a capitalist system you have to expand the forces of production. That's the ontological base of capitalism. There is no capitalism without growth. There is no possibility of imagining degrowth for me within a capitalist society, and that's my main criticism of the degrowth debate that sometimes seems to forget this elephant. And the question of technology changes completely once you start from this point, right? Because within a capitalist system, technology is primarily aimed, not only, at gains in efficiency in the productive process to begin with. It's entirely bent on optimizing the productive process in order to free time and resources, both material and immaterial, that can then be reinvested in the productive process so as to expand the productive forces, as we were saying before. And as Finberg says, Andrew Finberg, that technology can be useful only once it is freed from the imperative norm of efficiency. Once social values begin to be applied to technology, cultural norms, so what do we want technology for, as Luigi was saying before, then we can start to think about how, and that's again not possible within a capitalist system. So that leads me to the big question of why is the only thing that we have to do really on this, I'm absolutely certain, planning the economy completely out of the debate today, right? It's completely out. It is completely missing from the debate, and it's obvious that it's the only thing we have to do. We have to plan the production, not the consumption, right? We have to set limits on the number of cars you can, and all of a sudden, all of this becomes much easier, right? Not much easier to implement, but at least in relationship to the targets we were talking about before, right? We cannot own cars privately. We cannot only own cars in a shared fashion. So we have to reduce massively the production of cars. But that then leads all to the question of how you're going to reconvert the productive system. Of course, you need to reduce the number of work hours massively. You need to have an income, a generalized income that is attached to the work reduction. But all of this, of course, it's easy to say why all of this is not present. We know that socialist communist hypothesis has been completely, almost completely discredited by the fall of the Berlin Wall. But the question is, for me, how to think about a participatory planned economy. And I wanted to know your take on this. And the question is, why is it absent from the debate, from also the academic debate?
Thank you, Marco. Now, two more final questions, Donatella and Mario. Donatella was first and then Mario.
Okay, it's building a bit on this, and it is about the political dimensions, which I found a bit missing in terms not on the content of the policies, but on the political side the way of deciding. And you rightly said there is no longer a consensus. For sometimes the transition was presented as a win-win game, a bit like environmental sustainability. We will just have workers that will work in a nicer environment, moving them from the mines to the very exciting high technology position. Now this doesn't work any longer because attempts that were made in this, I have in mind the Green parties and the policies, the failures of the Green parties in Germany. I think this consensus is clearly missing. Now what is implemented is emergency politics. So as you said, is the urgency. And there is a lot of analysis of the ways in which these urgencies has affected the type of politics in austerity moments, austerity management of the economic crisis. And it means top-down policies, very centralized, based on the idea that there is no alternative. But these are not producing consensus, because to the opposite. They tend to produce quick decisions which are made through very selective definitions of expertise, small circles. Think about the crisis of the Green with all the issues of the technicians that were chosen as experts, Habeck's circles of supporters, which meant they had just one view. And the problem there is that even more than in the economic crisis, you don't build consensus, but you need consensus, because if you need to affect the ways in which people behave, you have to be convincing. So you don't convince people not to take, not to fly if you allow for private jets to fly. And so it's a bit in that direction, but you don't need the Soviets to decide these type of things. Nevertheless, the issues is how do we deal with the issues of conflicts and consensus. And there, my impression is that while these issues is missing in a lot of the debate, the idea of deliberation, participations, and definitions of different type of policies, which are not single issues, which are not just carbon, which are not focusing on the insiders without considering the external cost, is something that, for instance, the Gilets jaunes had in mind, that is not easy to implement, but which is something that probably is the only way forward. And there I wonder what the trade unions think about this. So how to construct this type of visions in which for the trade unions should be also a step back in accepting the role of other actors and the role not only of productions but also of the citizens. But another question is about the specific differences between cases in which unions join in concerns with climate change and other not, but maybe there is not so much time. We can discuss it soon.
Thank you very much for this very broad effort to combine different aspects. Let me start from the breakdown of the consensus on the green transition. What is the strength of this populist reactionary position? The return to a situation when different dimensions had an overlapping set of values and identities. So national identities, the power of the nation state to control and protect, constitutional social rights in labor and welfare states, and the individualism model of consumption, the individual freedom to consume. Okay, so this was the trajectory of the past decades, where there were this trade-off between political, economic, and social dimensions, and being a worker, a consumer, a citizen was integrated in a sense. Clearly, climate was completely ignored, and the climate cost was the aspect that was really suffering the external cost of all this model. What we miss, and they push you to develop further your approach, is a way to integrate new models of values and identities that can be at the basis of a coalition and of an alliance. In a context of capitalism and continuing neoliberal emphasis on individual freedom and consumption, how do we reframe limits, the limits that have been pointing out by many of the speakers? How do we frame the limits of consumption? Or do we use taxes? Do we use a different type of identities, more responsible consumption, things? So this is a big question on the economic side. On the environmental side, what is behind the need for addressing climate change? An idea of environmental responsibility of individuals, an idea of a systemic mode of production that has to account for climate aspects. So one of the weaknesses of the environmental story, how do people relate to it? They relate them as consumers, as workers, as citizens of a country, or as citizens of the world. But what are the political agencies that expresses this element? And clearly the welfare and the work issue is more stable, because this is a compromise between labor rights and the social rights of constitutions and the dynamics of capitalist relationships. So, but how do we bring in this set of identities and values the question of environment, and how we build, before building an alliance, how do we build a view that integrates this fragmentation of aspects?
Great, thank you very much. Some of these questions maybe should be left for Sunday, when in Florence there will be another event, not here, where Matteo Salvini, Gerd Wilders, Marine Le Pen, but we now ask Philippe whether he has some question on these various, some answer to these various questions, yeah. Or questions, why not?
I think that's just a question that you can not answer. It's for kind of debate and joint reflection, and there is no answer. I will start with framing, I think, and who is framing and how is framing. And I think that framing is rather interesting, because you have really separate communities so far. So I was at the DeGrow conference in Zagreb, and people are in the DeGrow, and they have a world of DeGrow. That's really interesting. And then returning, I was at Bruegel, and then you have another world, and it was exactly the same question, but the way they were framing the stuff is two worlds that ignore completely, and even Bruegel at the beginning, the problem of climate was energy, even by a socialist vice prime minister in Spain. So energy, it's just energy. We solve energy, it's finished. And then you see that's interesting to move, and that's why I'm interested in mapping the different way. And the trade unions is just transition. There is some effort from EPSU and some in energy. There is some coalition also to go further, but to try to return and to say, what could be the trade union of the future if we go for a post-grow, don't even say degrow, post-grow model? Do we have in our history some kind of element that we can reinterpret our roles, or should we continue to say what is the main question is about wage and social protection, where, if you remember, in Italy, Bruno Trentin in del Lavoro wrote that trade union lost their soul when they just concentrate on pay and welfare state and not working conditions. So that kind of was internal debate of the trade union. So it's not something different. But if I'm frank, and you know that now it's my turn, not being longer a member of the ETUI, that's the most difficult. There is, as I said, a huge project in framing. So just transition is the frame of the trade union. But what it means as alliance, etc., and it's really clear in the table, in the presentation, saying that they say also with the table, it's also who is driving, who are the actor, and is that the elite or is bottom up, and then for just transition, there's the only way point when they put trade unions is kind. So that's really that you have different. That's the problem of the framing. This kind of isolate community that speak to themselves, find a solution, but how do you create the consensus? Even I have to say there is kind of progress for me in academic debate to have much more broader perspective or try to integrate something different. On the question of indicator, I think that's fascinating. You have a problem, then you have the European Parliament to say, why not to increase by 5% the reduction of the emission? There is a big fight. You add 5%, nobody knows from the beginning, oh, it will be possible, because, okay, you can put 5%, but then you have to have a trajectory. There is a big fight between the Parliament and the Council. I think at the end of the day, it should be interesting. The Council say, we will not respect that. We say, yes, that kind of, and you increase. So you have a problem, or you put a new adjective, green, fair, sustainable, or you put a new target that you, that's kind of nonsense if you don't explain what is the trajectory. Returning to the green, that's kind of, do you think that the Green Party are speaking about climate change? In Belgium, they are in power, they speak about everything except climate change. In France, all the debate is, they can speak about education, about what they want, the kind of minority, intersectionality, but what is the step for the green? What should be, we have step 1, 2, 3. Don't see any. They can in Germany about war, Ukraine. They are very good army, but so there is what you said. There is a problem for me. It's okay starting from you have target, then you have to plan, or you reach the target to be serious, and you have to plan and you have to take some lesson of planning. I disagree a little bit. I think that some kind of, at least in the academic community, are just seeing what is the reality, go for planning. If you take the French debate, Dominique Méda, for example, recently, there is a lot of people now to say, okay, but in this espoir de cause, as we did nothing, that's the last solution, and we go for planning. But the point is, even stuff that are easy to do are not done. You say retrofitting. Everyone win. Less can define what is the job for the workers. We can say it should be the minimum wage should be that for the worker. You create a lot of job, and this kind of, and that's good for the climate. If you look all the stuff in France, in Belgium, all around, they say we will do 400,000 houses, and they do 1/4. So, but and then there is a new plan that they say, oh, okay, but this time we will do 6. And then they failed again. But there is no analysis why something which is a clear win-win situation is the housing if you put correctly the problem, but then you have a lot of tension, and you have also all the question that is not addressed, the kind of the sunken cost for the poor that have no money, that's in the car industry. That's kind of, if you have a old diesel and you are poor, what you do with your diesel? You lost your capital. And when you have a house which is you have to pay a lot for retrofitting. Well, what you do, you cannot rent some. So there is a lot of easy stuff to put a normal debate, a political debate, organized. But then you have to organize the debate, and you can have deliberation or deliberation traditional. That's something different. Even for the easiest stuff, it's not working. And that 20 years that is And then they will say, oh, it's a failure. We don't know why the people don't take the grant to take that and that. And I think that we arrive really at a one point that is on the table, which, once again, this kind of what is the feasibility of going there if people are not convinced, that kind of. And all the deliberation, if you have the example in France, they have the Assemblée des Citoyens to deliberate. There was fantastic conclusion. They were going very far, even the speed on the highway there is. And then just it was cheat. The kind of the poor say, okay, that's interesting, but that's too ambitious for us. And that was not working. And they didn't have any canal to communicate per se the result, to convince, because they were not linked to network, because they were drawn by chance, and not because they were representative of some societal power or of networking. And that's really, I think that's the element which is important. And also for technology, I think that's technology. If you want to be serious, then you say, okay, or you will share the technology. Let's not take the radical. Then you have to say, okay, the system of patent is perhaps not the best, because then you say the winner take all. Say if you have the technology, then you want to have this kind of company just destroying or becoming a monopoly, and then you should have the discussion of open source, even simple discussion, because then you say cooperation, but you don't have that, because in the same way, it could be reinterpreted as kind of capitalist winner, and it's not just to solve a problem, it's all this kind of new environment, I can win, and that's my innovation will be restricted to my company or my company as supplier. So that's kind of, I think, element, important element. Yeah, that's the, I think I asked to Donatella partly about trade unions and deliberation. There is kind of Pavlovian reflex of the trade unions. It's kind of when you have other group that they fear that will grant the same statute than them, they close the debate. Publicly, they close the debate. I don't say that internally you don't have a debate. Group unable to communicate in trade unions, they have a very difficult to hierarchical way of communicating. But that's the problem. That's the problem. But in the same time, you have some kind of alliance that were strong. That's kind of a Spring Alliance, for example. That's kind of was really to try to integrate, but was at the level leadership of the NGOs. On the last question of populism, etc., I think that's kind of, that's also that's something also very traditionally at European level. There is action or stronger action when there is some fear. Long time ago, fear of communism, but now it's fear of populism. So fear of populism, and then you have this kind of more social policy. I don't say that you have but without this kind of austerity period, you cannot explain why we have a direct page. Yes, it is completely true, etc. And you cannot explain a lot of element. The problem is how you can, how much the can move. And for me, it's kind of, when I start to compare and analyzing, at the very beginning, you had the kind of communication of the Commission was much more, we have different options. You have this kind of control, so the first 3 pages is direction, but when you arrive for 4, there was more direction. And step by step, there was kind of more stuff that we know there is one direction. And there is one point, or when the international organization were more progressive, the bargaining of the social and the austerity. So I think that's the point here is we return to say we have, that's why I like the stuff of Adem. We have different options. There is no one way. There is option that could lead to the same result, but you cannot take no option or to take the option leading to nowhere. So the point that you arrive and there is option and there is choice, I think is important. Create some consensus with it. But you are imposed to say that you have to do that. And then I think what I call that's a slide, the heroic reinvention of yourself is nice for you, but is that if you want to see how you move, that could be collective behavior, and collective behavior is, okay, you put norm, tax, can add some kind of trends, but if you don't have that, you not change any behavior. You convince themselves, convince the other to reinvent themselves, and stop to train. You have the mobility is also easy. Yeah, that's easy to understand. And then you can have different options. Share that and see the problem, but then you have option on something that is common agreement. And still the question of urgency, that's all the debates, it's kind of, because the debate, we had this debate 30 years. More sophisticated, more interesting, but where are the solutions? And that's where I'm finished with that. I think rethinking some kind of role for the welfare state, or it can move to and that's why I think this kind of eco-care possibility to out of the system add some kind of, at the same time, decommodification. You go out of the system for personal purpose, but you organize that collectively. And then you create perhaps a critical mass that can change. So that's not the UBI, but the UBI will not be implemented. Could be in some kind of element when you think what could be partly the individual motivation, but within a collective framework that can have some kind of transformative power of the whole system. And that's, I think, a way of exploring, at least I'm interested.
Thank you. We finished on time on this. And with this lecture, we close the autumn series of Carlo Azeglio Ciampi lecture. It's been a very, very exciting series of events on various very important topics. So thank you very much, Philippe, for today and for all the food for thought on this important topic. And we'll start with another cycle in the spring. Thank you.